You wake up and your back hurts. You take something for it, go about your day, and by lunch, you've mostly forgotten about it. That's the deal we've made with pain. It shows up, we medicate it into the background, and we move on. Now, take that away. No pharmacy, no ibuprofen, no dentist you can call. Just a body that's breaking down from decades of grinding grain, hauling water, and walking 15 miles a day, and nothing standing between you and that pain except whatever your group had figured out by trial and error. And here's the thing people get wrong. They assume ancient humans just suffered silently and called it a day. They didn't. They built an entire toolkit for dealing with pain, some of it shockingly effective, some of it based on nothing but hope. Today, we're going through both. Let's start with what their bodies were actually dealing with, because it's worse than people assume. Skeletal remains from early agricultural societies show something researchers call the osteoarthritis spike. Once humans switched from hunting and gathering to farming, joint damage in the spine, hips, and knees increased dramatically. Grinding grain by hand for hours a day wrecked the wrists and lower back. Carrying water wrecked the neck and shoulders. Hunter-gatherer skeletons, by comparison, often show less wear because the work was more varied. So agriculture didn't just give humans a steadier food supply, it gave them chronic pain as a side effect, and it never really left. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because the fix humans reached for first wasn't some primitive guess, it was actually right: willow bark. The active compound in it is called salicin, and your body converts it into salicylic acid, which is the same basic compound behind modern aspirin. The Ebers Papyrus, an Egyptian medical text from around 1550 BC, lists willow bark specifically for pain and inflammation. But the story goes back further than that. In 2017, researchers analyzing dental calculus, the hardened plaque on ancient teeth, found traces of poplar bark, which contains the same salicylic compound, in the teeth of a Neanderthal from El Cedron cave in Spain. This Neanderthal had a dental abscess and evidence of gut infection. He was in pain, and the chemical signature in his teeth suggests he was self-medicating with something that actually works on a molecular level. That's not folklore. That's a Neanderthal doing real pharmacology 50,000 years before anyone wrote a medical textbook. Then there's the poppy. Opium has one of the oldest and clearest track records in human history. Sumerian tablets from around 3000 BC refer to the poppy plant using a term that translates to joy plant. Archaeologists later found actual poppy capsules preserved alongside 6,000-year-old woven sandals in Cueva de los Murciélagos, a cave in Spain, showing the plant was being deliberately collected and stored, not just stumbled upon. Opium does something willow bark can't. It doesn't just reduce inflammation, it blocks the pain signal itself by binding to receptors in the brain. Ancient people had no idea what a receptor was. They just knew that this specific plant made suffering more bearable, and once they learned that, they never let go of it.
Now let's talk about the part that sounds insane but is completely real: trepanation. This is the practice of cutting or drilling a hole directly into someone's skull while they were alive. It sounds like a death sentence, but here's the detail that changes everything. Archaeologists can tell whether a trepanation patient survived, because if the bone had time to heal and regrow around the hole, that means the person lived for months or years afterward. And a huge number of trepan skulls show exactly that kind of healing. Some estimates put survival rates in certain populations above 50%, which for skull surgery with stone tools and zero anesthesia is honestly stunning. Nobody knows for certain why they did it. The leading theories are relief for severe migraines, seizures, or swelling from head trauma. Whatever the reasoning, this wasn't some rare, desperate ritual. Trepan skulls have been found across Europe, South America, and Asia, which means multiple unconnected human groups independently arrived at drill into the skull to relieve pressure as a legitimate medical strategy. Dental pain deserves its own mention because it might have been the most common source of chronic agony in the ancient world. There was no dentistry in the way we understand it, which meant a cavity wasn't a minor inconvenience, it was a years-long, unrelenting problem. Researchers examining a 9,000-year-old skeleton found teeth with tiny, precise holes drilled into them using a flint-tipped bow drill, essentially an early dental filling procedure performed without anesthesia. And in some populations, resin or beeswax has been found packed directly into cavities, likely to seal out air and reduce the raw nerve exposure that makes a toothache unbearable. People were doing functional dentistry with stone tools and tree sap thousands of years before the first dental chair existed.
Wound pain is another category entirely, and one solution here is almost too strange to believe. In parts of Africa and South America, some groups used soldier ants to close wounds. You'd hold the ant against the two edges of a cut, let it bite down and lock its mandibles across the gap, then twist off the body, leaving the head and jaws clamped in place like a natural staple. Multiple ants in a row could close a decent-sized wound. It sounds brutal, but mechanically it worked, and it meant the difference between a wound that stayed shut and one that reopened with every movement. And then there was the pain nobody could treat with plants or ants at all, which was pain during childbirth or during surgery without any way to dull the nerves completely. In these cases, alcohol was one of the more reliable tools available. Fermented drinks go back further than most people assume, and while alcohol doesn't block pain the way opium does, it does reduce anxiety and blunts the intensity of the experience enough to matter. It wasn't a perfect solution, it was often the only one on hand. What's easy to miss in all of this is that pain relief wasn't just chemical, it was social. Enduring something excruciating while surrounded by people who stayed with you, held you, or simply witnessed it changes how the brain processes the experience. Modern research on pain shows that social presence alone can lower perceived pain intensity, likely tied to oxytocin release. Ancient humans didn't need a study to tell them that. They just knew that suffering alone in the dark was worse than suffering next to someone else, so a huge amount of ancient pain management wasn't a plant or a tool at all. It was simply not being left by yourself. So when you put it all together, ancient humans weren't defenseless against pain. They had a working pharmacy hiding in tree bark. They had brain surgery for pressure they couldn't otherwise explain. They had dentistry with stone drills. They had wound closure using live insects. And they had each other, which might have mattered more than any of it. None of this was guesswork dressed up as medicine. Some of it, like the willow bark, turned out to be chemically identical to what you'll find in your medicine cabinet right now. The next time you take a painkiller without a second thought, remember that the idea behind it is not new. It's one of the oldest problems humans have ever tried to solve, and somehow, with almost nothing, they made real progress on it.